Amid rising global tensions, the United States is slowly but steadily warming up to China. After several high-profile visits to China, U.S. Commerce Secretary Gina Raimondo is traveling to China in order to keep communication going amidst deteriorating ties between the global powers. Starting Sunday, Raimondo is going to visit Shanghai and Beijing during her 4-day trip. The trip materialized after an invitation by Chinese Commerce Minister Wang Wentao. U.S. and China continue to look at their relationship with skepticism. As per sources, both the countries are expected to discuss the following concerns. Raimondo is expected to raise the issue of raids on American consultancy firms. Early this year, Chinese authorities raided the offices of Mintz Group in Beijing and Bain & Company in Shanghai. The Secretary will also touch upon Chinese market access for American companies during the visit. China's new anti-espionage law will also be a major concern for Raimondo as it puts aspersions on the smooth functioning of U.S. companies in the country. The ban on the sale of memory chips made by U.S. Micron Technology is also on the cards for the discussion. Meanwhile, China is expected to demand further relaxation of U.S. export controls on Chinese products. Beijing is also expected to try and reach a broad consensus of ongoing containment efforts by the U.S. military to reduce technological reliance on China. In order to cozy up to Beijing before the meeting, U.S. has confirmed a series of measures to relax trade restrictions. These relaxations contradict the U.S. president's announcement just weeks ago. Earlier, on August 10th, President Joe Biden announced new restrictions on investments into Chinese technology companies. And last Monday, the Commerce Department announced the removal of 27 Chinese entities from its trade restriction list. The Commerce Secretary's visit comes at a time when weak exports and a fall in industrial production and employment in China has been reported. This would be the fourth major U.S.-China sit-down and follow trips by Secretary of State Antony Blinken, Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen, and Climate Envoy John Kerry. And for more on this, joining us on this broadcast is an international affairs expert, Stephen Golub. He's joining us from California. Stephen Golub, good to see you. He's also an analyst and also a lawyer. What do you make of this trip by the U.S. to China? We've had 4 ministers, 4 secretaries, just to mention a few, Secretary of State Antony Blinken and also Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen, and now we have Commerce Secretary Raimondo going to Beijing. What do you make of these trips?
Well, as your introduction very correctly suggested, there's a political dimension to this trip in addition to the economic one. Yes, profits and jobs on both sides could benefit with improved economic relations, with the restoration of better economic relations. But as our own national security advisor has recently emphasized, it's important to maintain good relations, to maintain engaged, so that the competition between these two countries, economic, political, geostrategic, doesn't tip into conflict. And that's really, really important. Beyond that, from the Chinese side, their economy, as you said, is in trouble. It's having problems. They benefit from better economic relations. We also benefit politically because the better the economy is doing in China, it not only benefits us in America and much of the world, but it also that might decrease the chances that President Xi would turn to very xenophobic saber rattling to try to rattle the population around him if they become more dissatisfied by the poor economy.
Stephen, we are focusing on trade or the trade imbalance between the 2 global powers, that is China and the United States. We also had President Joe Biden on the 10th of August, like I mentioned in my read, that he had announced new restrictions on investments into Chinese technology companies. What do you think the Commerce Secretary will be able to gain from her trip to China?
Yeah, that's a good question. In that regard, in terms of the strategic competition, the threat that the U.S. sees, probably correctly, in terms of giving China access to advanced chip technology. I'm not sure she can accomplish that much. The purpose of their trip may be to ease tensions, increase economic ties, or at least pave the way for better economic ties in other ways, even as the Biden administration sticks to its guns, so to speak, in terms of maintaining controls over chip exports. One other dimension I'd like to add to this is I talked about Chinese domestic politics, the potential problem of President Xi becoming more xenophobic. We face something like this on the U.S. side also. Donald Trump recently announced that if he's president, he'll try to raise tariffs across the board against all countries around the world, including China, including India for that matter. So better relations with China could at least dim somewhat the impulse on the part of the American public to lash out against China for unjustified reasons, the way President Trump is threatening to do through these tariffs against China and the rest of the world.
Stephen, finally, and I want your brief response to this one. We are reporting weak exports from China and a fall in industrial production and even employment in China. Who can save China apart from the United States?
President Xi, the Chinese government. It's really up to him and them, and mainly him, to adopt policies that will stimulate the Chinese economy better, that will prevent the backsliding that's gone on as he stepped away from greater confidence in private business and has put more of the economy under state control, which has been quite counterproductive.
All right, I've been speaking to Stephen Golub. He's an analyst. Thank you very much for all your insights and for talking to WION World is One today.
Thanks for having me.
WION is now available in your country. Download the app now and get all the news on the move.